Hello, everyone. My name is Padmini Nidumolu, and I'm the co-founder of Lean and Agile for women to come together and share their stories, their expertise, their experience, and offer to the community, and do not hesitate to seek from the community, because I am, because we are. So we're all stronger, more powerful, more enabled together than separate from each other. As part of this organization, an initiative was born in 2019 to honor and celebrate stories of 100 women in lean and agile spaces across the globe, because there are cultural contexts, organizational contexts, which are so different from geography to geography, and we wanted to bring in the stories and make our learning so much more richer and learn from each other, and more than anything, to raise the floor for each other, to get the women voices across the world to a platform and assure us that this is possible. So as part of that, today's guest is none other than Barbara Roberts. And there's so much to be told about Barbara. And I met her on LinkedIn when I was researching about the Agile summits and consortiums across the globe. And she obviously stood out because she has such vast experience and decades of insights. So let me introduce her to you all. So Barbara Roberts has been actively engaged in Agile from its inception. That's what makes it so special about this guest today. She was an early adopter for one of the first Agile methods, DSDM, which was developed based on the UK complex corporate environment. She was also a director of the Agile Business Consortium for over 20 years, and this consortium was previously known as DSDM Consortium. And in creation of Agile Project Management, AgilePM as it's popularly called, this was Barbara's original idea, and this has recently surpassed 100,000 exams through ABC, which is pretty phenomenal. Barbara is well known for her pragmatic, common sense approach to Agile, and has led many successful Agile transformations with organizations from all business sectors, often in highly regulated environments, and we know how critical that is. Barbara continues to drive the effective use of Agile in the complex corporate arena, most recently leading the team creating Agile Portfolio Management, which is AgilePM, as we all know. Barbara is a signatory of the Agnostic Agile Oath and believes strongly that choosing the right Agile approach or combination of Agile approaches is the key factor for success, and not being hung up on which method or which framework. She has published a white paper as well on this topic, Agile Wars and How to Avoid Them. To support this viewpoint, I think all of us definitely appreciate that. So with that, welcome, Barbara, to LIA100. So glad you're able to join us today.
Thank you.
All right, so I'd like to start with, you are one of the early adopters of Agile mindset and methods. Can you share with us how Agile methods and engagement with organizations about maturing Agile mindset has evolved over the last decades? What stands out prominently in your journey?
I think when we started, so I mean, I've always worked this way. To me, it's just the most natural way of working. But when we started doing it properly, so in the early days of DSDM, 1994, 95, we were considered the idiots, the mad people. We were constantly fighting everybody else trying to tell us that what we were doing was wrong. You know, I was told that enjoying work, because I was the RAD manager and I had a small team, I was told that my team were enjoying themselves far too much at work. So they moved us out into a porta cabin in the car park because they said we were too noisy. But it was, in the early days, it was fighting against the majority. Accepting that we were perfectly happy to be treated differently because we behaved differently, but actually delivering successes in face of the almost impossible challenges was just brilliant, so rewarding. And for me, I think in the early days, right from the start, I identified people that were working with me, so I was sort of RAD manager, some of the guys that were working for me were written off by the organization. You know, somebody would say, oh, he's not very good, he's average at COBOL. But he was a brilliant communicator, a brilliant facilitator. So I ended up sort of coaching and mentoring quite a lot of the young graduates in what was at the time the sort of National Railway organization, and encouraging people to be different and do things differently, and working on things like teamwork and communication, team spirit, just being incredibly flexible. And in the early days, it's been an uphill challenge, and probably until fairly recently, that was still true. I think what's frightening me now is that suddenly Agile is the buzzword. In fact, we're hearing a lot of Agile words on our COVID briefings as well. It seems to be the in word. But what frightens me is people are adopting it or say they're adopting it without actually understanding what it means. So you get the mentality that I'm doing Scrum, therefore the organization is Agile. And it's moved now to the challenge is to stop people turning Agile into a dogmatic way of applying it. So I've been told, for example, that I can't do that because it doesn't say that in the Scrum guide. Or I'm told you can't have Agile on projects, or I don't know what I'm talking about. I get some people telling me I don't know what I'm talking about because, you know, Agile can't work with projects. And it's trying to explain to people that Agile in a small startup is very, very different from a complex corporate with regulatory constraints. So I've worked with people who, for example, have told the auditors that they can't be audited because they're excused because they're doing Agile. So for me, it's what worries me now is the misunderstanding, the Agile fanaticism that's coming in, and people are losing the common sense that underpins Agile right from the start. So when I find Agile people aren't being flexible, I think some of it is people need to go back to basics and understand what Agile is all about. It's about dealing with impossible circumstances. It's about dealing with volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. And these days, that's more prevalent than anything else in the world. Everything is about VUCA. And COVID is a brilliant example of that. People are looking for certainty. Can you tell me exactly what date and time something's going to happen? When the answer is simply, no, we don't know.
Yeah, very true. And it's funny how Agile, the buzzword, is thrown everywhere.
Yeah.
Right, for the optics and not to deal with VUCA. So I think you bring up a great point.
I think also it's when you're going to talk to senior management and you know that they know there's this Agile woman coming in to talk to them. So they go away and look up Agile on Wikipedia and think they've actually got it sorted.
Yeah, true, true. So, that actually brings me to Agnostic Agile, right? And you're a signatory of that oath.
Yes, absolutely.
Tell us a little bit more about that, Barbara. So what does it mean to you and why should it be agnostic?
Because the important thing is that organizations need to choose the Agile approach that suits their particular problem. So, for example, Scrum is brilliant at what it does, but it doesn't manage complex change. It's a team process. I get very annoyed when I find that organizations are being sold SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework, when they're not even doing anything that's technical. So they're sold SAFe for a business change. So one of the reasons that I wrote the Agile Wars white paper is I've done this presentation a number of times, and it just seems to hit a lot of buttons that basically, why do we have to choose one Agile approach? Why is it that somebody will come in and kick out one Agile approach so they can sell in their own brand? So why can't we have Scrum with AgilePM, with Agile Program Management, with Agile Portfolio, with Kanban, with Lean? Why would we choose just one? Because, if you're a simple, small startup, life is simple. But in any complex organization, projects are key. They don't go away because you're doing Agile, because people still need a beginning, a middle, and an end. You're going to have gating, you're going to have budgeting constraints. So to say that you can't do Agile projects is just flawed. AgilePM was always designed, DSDM was always designed to work with other things. So for me, the most common combination is going to be Scrum with AgilePM in a complex corporate, or Scrum inside SAFe. But it's not about one or the other. Lean and Kanban fit into all of them. It's a way of thinking. But if you're delivering a program of change, then ideally you need Agile Program Management, because you've got underneath that, you've got Agile projects, you might have traditional projects. So most organizations are not going to be 100% Agile, and they're never going to be. And again, you know, I talk to people a lot and they say, well, we're being measured on how Agile we are. But there are pieces of work that I wouldn't touch with a barge pole. I wouldn't try and do them Agile, particularly because they're not particularly Agile. So if you're doing a desktop refresh, it's more of a traditional repeatable process than an extremely Agile process. So what I try and do, and most of my coaching is about giving people enough information so they can make the right choices for themselves, for their organizations. And if the answer is just Scrum, then absolutely great. If people are just doing Kanban and that's what they want to do, that's absolutely fine. So the agnostic Agile thing is about, I won't go in and just sell in AgilePM if it's not the right approach. So I've worked on sort of using all the Agile approaches. And to me, it's about the right choices rather than being dogmatic about mine's better than yours.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that is pure Agile coaching, right? Being agnostic to frameworks and,
Yeah.
Any commercial setup, but actually coaching and let the organization figure out and decide which framework or methodology might be best for them. So I think that's a very valuable, point you raised.
I think what frightens me is when consultants go into an organization with a pre-prepared answer.
Yeah.
I go in with a blank sheet of paper and listen.
And in fact, that's the most common scenario we see across. So, which is unfortunate, but it's a sad truth.
Mm.
So you mentioned a little bit about Agile Project Management, Barbara. So let's talk about that a little bit, right? So recently I've heard and seen several viewpoints contradicting the value of Agile Project Management. So typically the perception is project management is racing towards an end date of a project or a program, which means that you know what the end goal is, you know what the end timeline is, and everything is laid out, resource allocation, budget, everything is in place, and project management is simply tracking it.
No.
So many people contested that, hey, Agile Project Management, what does it mean and what should we know? Since you are one of the early designers of this, and of course now you have 100,000 people kind of taking it, you probably have the most insight into it. Can you please enlighten us?
So if you look at, what you described was a traditional project with a beginning, a middle and an end, a fixed end date, a fixed goal, a fixed detail, a fixed plan, fixed resources, fixed budgeting. It's not like that at all. But if you work in a corporate, funding is important. And people, for example, if you've got a fixed end date, I can tell you that we will have a good solution driven by you on that date, but the exact detail of what you're going to get will change over time. Mm-hmm. So typically an Agile project is broken into increments. So you deliver in a series of releases, if you like. You look for early return on investment, you look for fast fail. If you want tighter constraints, it may be that at the end of each increment, you have to go back and beg for the next release of funding. The reality is that quite a lot of projects have delivered most of their value partway through, and you've got resources tied up on a project that's delivering minimal value, whilst other projects can't be started because the resources are tied up. So one of the things we promote is the idea of you deliver short, fat projects rather than long, drawn-out ones. You focus on delivering of value, and when the value is decreased to the point where there isn't a business case for what's left, you stop. So delivering against an end goal is perfectly normal. If you've got to get something out for a newspaper or for a conference or for a trade show, you absolutely have to get something out there. And potentially, yes, you'd love to take them the Rolls Royce of all solutions, but the reality is it's more important to get something out there for the show that is good, looks reasonable, delivers what it needs to deliver, but there may be certain things that are missing. And actually, at the end of the day, it might not matter. So one of the points about Agile Project Management, if you look at Scrum, and if you've got a team delivering Scrum day in, day out, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, above that, there's often a bigger picture, which is actually about bringing things together. So if you've got multiple facets to a project, the project level, the higher level roles are the ones that have got the bigger picture. So at the higher level, you might have a technical architect, you have somebody who's a visionary, you've got your sponsor. So your visionary is interested in delivering this work against their future vision. Your technical architect is interested in making sure that what we're delivering, if it's a technical solution, is technically sustainable and viable, of a sufficient quality. Your sponsor is interested in the funding. The project manager's role, unlike a traditional project manager, an agile project manager is more a facilitator, and their role basically is to help the team get this out the door. So they're not command and control. They're not dividing up the work. So if you're managing a self-organizing team, basically you're there to help to kick open doors, to manage the upwards and outwards interactions with senior stakeholders, with external stakeholders. For example, if you're working in a Scrum team, you don't necessarily want to be all dealing up with the program level, because a project potentially is part of a program, and the program is where the change is being embedded. And it's about bringing all these elements together. So Scrum is very good at the team level, but it doesn't have the concept of a project. And if you want a project, you've got to build it on top. And I can't see the point of trying to build project onto Scrum if you can just plug it very neatly into Agile Project Management and all that thinking's been done for you. Because at the team level, the solution development team in AgilePM is in effect the Scrum team or Scrum teams, and the project level brings in that coordination without taking away any of the agility.
Right. And I know that you're also working on portfolio management, right?
Yes.
Agile portfolio management. So can you tell us how these two kind of plug into each other?
So if you look at the organization I'm working in at the moment, they have multi-levels. So they've got the teams at the sharp end, if you like, actually doing the day-to-day work. Above that, you've got the projects that are delivering something. Sitting above that, you've got the programs that are coordinating the change within the organization. And sitting above that, you've got the PMO, the project management, the portfolio level. And at portfolio level, what you've got is a very, very high level view of all this work going on. And the way I describe portfolio is it's like air traffic control, that you've got stuff coming in, you've got stuff that you've planned, but you've got emergencies happening. So you need to stop some things and bring other things in. And you need to be constantly revising based on what's going on in the outside world. So an agile portfolio is driven by events. It means that every time you deliver an increment, it might revise your next steps. Every time there's an external event, so external to this portfolio, but internal to the organization, you might need to revise, or it might be an external event external to the organization, which could be a competitor threat or an opportunity. And the portfolio just has to be agile because it's got to be flexing around what's happening around it. If you get anybody these days that is laminating a plan, you're destined to failure, because it's just not worth the effort. Okay. So the portfolio might have underneath it a lot of traditional stuff, but they still need to be doing the air traffic control of stopping things, starting things, and following the value, following the benefits, not just taking the approach that I've started, so I'll finish. And it's hard. If you're working on a project or a piece of work and it's stopped, it's very personal, or it feels it. But it isn't. It's about the good of the organization, the success of the organization, and it's about not taking it personally. Sure. So it's making sure you've got the bigger picture. And there's a couple of white papers. One is about Agile Portfolio as the next step in an organization that's already Agile. The second one is about Agile Portfolio as the first step in an organization that wants to become Agile.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. And we strongly encourage these white papers, I'm assuming, are published, right, on your LinkedIn or otherwise.
Yes, certainly. I think I can, if not, I can make them available to you.
Yeah.
The Agile Portfolio Management is a mini book, if you like. It's a small book. It's very readable. It's written in common sense language, because my background is languages and I like clear communication. And it's written based on decades of experience of the guys, the team that we got together to develop it. And it's actually quite readable. So, if people are interested in that, they might find it worth a read.
Yeah, please do share that, Barbara. Thank you for that. So I'd like to kind of, pivot here, right, and talk about inclusive organizations. And since Lean and Agile is driving towards that inclusivity, but with a gender lens, I want to be very clear about that, because inclusivity is across, right, all dimensions. So you've been involved in the space for so long, Barbara, and I know that you've been to a number of conferences, you're a prolific speaker, you've engaged with so many people. In your experience, what was it like to be a woman, A? B, did you see a lot of women coming in and creating space for themselves, or the organizations creating space for them? It's a multi-layered question. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I've got the best experience ever, because one of my early experiences was I worked for F International, the absolutely awesome Steve Shirley. And F International was set up by Steve Shirley, who called herself Steve rather than Stephanie, because it was a male-dominated world. And the organization was set up for women who had had children and wanted to come back to work, but couldn't work on-site full-time. And I worked for them for years, and it was absolutely awesome. Working in an organization that was all women was a whole different ballgame. And when they eventually started to engage men, it sort of changed the balance a little bit. And then eventually they brought in a male consultancy organization, and these guys came in, and they changed it. But what that taught me, and what F International and Steve Shirley taught me, was to value my skills, and it taught me to be myself, not to try to be like other people, not to behave like a man, but to value what I actually bring to a team, to an organization. And she and working with them gave me the confidence to say, you know what, I'm me, and this is the way I am, this is what I'm good at, these are my skills, my style of speaking is me. It's very different to other people. Somebody told me I wouldn't go down well in America. They wouldn't like my style. But I was over in America, in Chicago, about a month ago, and they seemed okay with it. So it's about developing self-confidence in just being yourself, not being apologetic for being a woman, not trying to be a man, but just recognizing that women have particular skill sets. Without gender stereotyping,
Sure.
We are normally more collaborative.
Yeah.
We are normally good communicators. We're normally good team people. We're normally more understanding, because, a lot of, you're going to have a lot of mothers that deal with children all the time, and they deal with them very differently, perhaps, to the way dads do. Have to be incredibly flexible. So I have a very, very strong view that true equality is where people are chosen because they're the best person to do the job. And I've always said I never want to be chosen because, if you get me, you're ticking woman, elderly, not your typical agile fanatic. So I think every individual should be judged on their abilities. And it's accepting that a good team has a combination of abilities. I mean, we choose, we put together and we help teams looking at things like Belbin assessments, looking at personality, to make sure we've got the right balances of personalities. But I think also the right balance of skills, gender, backgrounds. It makes life more interesting. I mean, if everybody was like like me, A, it would be a nightmare, but B, you'd get a single viewpoint. So I bring a different viewpoint to somebody who is 20, male, um, technically very skilled, even my background is languages rather than IT. So I'm very keen on the communication thing. But it is interesting, as I spoke to you earlier, I presented at the Women in Project Management conference a couple of years ago in the UK. And I was staggered. I'd not been to an all-women conference before. There were a few men there, but I was staggered at the passion and the interest. And I think what women do bring is an absolute passion, but usually with a good dose of common sense. And I think that's got a huge value to any organization and any team. And the nice thing these days is that there is a lot more flexibility. The idea of encouraging women to come back to work part-time in the 60s, 70s was so groundbreaking.
Yeah.
But it taught me how to manage a distributed team, to be flexible when somebody that was doing some work has got a problem with a toddler at home and was having to work in the evenings rather than during a working day. It's changed so much. But I think it's about not being apologetic. A lot of women seem to lack self-belief and self-confidence,
Yeah.
and we judge ourselves harder than we do other people. And what we need to learn to do is judge ourselves in the same way we judge everybody else, not to apply different standards. So not overconfidence, not exaggerating our skills and ability, but equally not being overly modest. And certainly the interesting thing for me is, the British culture is being terribly modest. You do a brilliant job and you say to the team, right, we'll do a retrospective on how it's gone. And they all go, oh, I didn't think that went too badly, did it? And you go to America and you go to the States and you go to Australia and people will do, high fives. We don't do high fives in the UK a lot. We're not very good at group hugs either. But it's about being honest about how well something's gone, but also being honest about what didn't go well and constantly learning. So I think also for women in business, it's about being confident to say you will constantly learn. So I run masterclasses. I've run them for about the last 15, 20 years. And the objective of the masterclasses I've run is that everybody learns something new today. And that includes me, because I'm still learning about Agile, so I'm learning from other people. So women are good listeners as well, in my experience, and that is an incredibly good starting point. Actually listening and watching, reading body language, you can pick up so much.
Thank you, Barbara. I think that is such a powerful share about your experiences with what women can bring to the table, right? It seems like common sense, but we were chatting before, common sense is not common.
No.
And I think the point you made that women are very hard on themselves, low on self-confidence in most cases because we want to aim high and our standards for ourselves are very high. But it's very hard for us to be ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Because we're constantly judging ourselves and we are not bringing the original us to people.
And that's what we should bring. I'll just share one lovely one with me. In my very early career, I applied for a job that I really wanted because I wanted to move up to, we'd bought a house and I needed a job locally. And I went into a small organization and had an interview. And at the end of the interview, the gentleman said to me, he said, well, you're the best candidate we've had for the job, but we really wanted a man. So we'll let you know because we're going to wait and see if any men apply.
Wow.
And I got the job. And a year later, I was this guy's boss. And I taught him how to be a good manager. And I really enjoyed that. That was just, fortunately, I haven't, I just decided I'd never be in that position again. But the world has changed. But sometimes there is a hidden bias.
I think that invisible bias is probably still, is in place. And I think it will be in place for, years to come. I'm not overly optimistic that it's going to change overnight. I think that invisible bias will exist. But again, I think, yeah.
We have advantages though. I mean, I feel I have an advantage. I'm not very tall. I'm 5'2". I'm not intimidating, and I can go quietly in and I can talk to people, and I can be incredibly persuasive and explain to people what things that are a good idea. And in effect, I can sell Agile, and I don't come up against the barriers that some of my 6'2", very large, very authoritative colleagues come up against, because if you're very large, very authoritative and loud and quite aggressive, people will be on the defensive. I don't pose a threat. And I use that sometimes, it has been known, just by being approachable.
Yeah.
I hear things, people talk to me, they tell me things. I don't need to drag it out to them. You know, people will tell me what they're worried about or what's bothering them or the problems they have. And I get this from very, very senior management, as well as sort of people that I'm coaching at the team level.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I think we have advantages, right? And some of us have been good at bringing it to the table. Some of us probably should do. But yeah, being approachable and looking at individuals as individuals, discrete individuals, because we deal with kids as
Yeah.
moms, if we are moms, and we know that no two children are the same. So I think, that's what we bring to the table.
So I think that my main message to people would be, you have got to be you. You can't be anybody else, and you can't pretend to be somebody else, because it looks false. So just be you, be confident, and be confident in what you're good at.
Yeah. So, it's funny you mentioned that as your message, because I usually end my interviews with a message, request for a message, and I say, hey, what message do you have for the community? It could be a word or a phrase. And I was just about to ask, and you read my mind. So,
Sorry.
actually, you read my mind. I think, you really summed it up so well as a message that be yourself. There's nobody like you. Everybody else is taken, right?
Yes.
And let's be confident is, I think it's been said so many times by so many people in so many formats, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
Right? I think we need to hear it again and again and absorb it and internalize it so it's true for all of us.
Well, particularly if you look at good teams have a mix of personality styles. If you look at a good sports team, you've got defenders, you've got attackers, you've got fast runners, you've got the ones that will stop you,
Yeah.
be the ones that will flatten you. But the good team is a mix. It's not that they all do the same thing. So it's getting that balance in there. And you could have a team of all women, but they'd all be different. So it's not just about gender, it's about you as a person, and that's what you bring. And it's not being embarrassed or ashamed, it's being quietly confident. And also just recognizing what you're good at. And also recognizing there are things you're not good at that you can change, and there's some things you're not good at that you can't change.
Yeah.
So live with it.
I think it's about being open.
Yeah.
Have a growth mindset, right?
Always.
Yeah.
You're never too old to learn.
Yeah, and I think I was sharing with you, prior to this, if somebody does not think or believe they don't need coaching, you cannot coach them. So it has to be from the person. So that's a great message to wrap this up. But thank you so much, Barbara. I think,
No, you're welcome. It's been fun.
And you've been so willing to share your experiences. And I know this will be a very impactful interview for women and men alike who are listening to this. And hopefully we'll bring you to more and more platforms so you can share with us.
I think it's worth, if people are interested, I think there's a TED Talk with Steve Shirley. Also interesting, very, very interesting lady, years ahead of her time, but a shining example to getting women into work.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll definitely check out the TED Talk. I'm very interested in this topic, as you can tell. But thank you so much, Barbara. This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.